Alright, so welcome back to another episode of Berserk, the differences between the 1997 anime and the manga. Let's get started. So we begin where we left off. The Band of the Hawk takes on and takes down the Black Ram Cavalry. Griffith gives Guts a thumbs up for a job well done. Now in the anime, the camera focuses in on Casca, who seems slightly irked by the adulation that Guts is receiving from Griffith. Whereas in the manga, this moment doesn't exist. The Hawks Raiders congratulate Guts after the battle, and Casca asks Guts to speak with him alone, all like in the manga. Casca henceforth excoriates the quote-unquote mad dog, and Guts grabs her wrist in a fit of rage before Griffith intervenes, just like the manga. You know, as an aside, it would have been interesting to see how this would have played out if Griffith didn't come between them. Interesting choice of words there on my part. But on a more serious note, I almost wonder what Guts would have done here, and if it would have got serious, like if Guts would have actually hit her or something, because he grabbed her wrist in a very vicious fashion here, so I almost felt a little bit of fear watching this again, and I'm like, man, is he gonna hit her? Like, I know he's not, but he kind of gives off that vibe that maybe he might. So interesting little scene there. Now Griffith reminisces about their duel from 3 years ago and explains that Guts' volatile actions are a part of his plans. Griffith henceforth gets knighted, while Guts strength trains with his sword. Nothing new here. Now the second half of the episode is an anime original. In the manga, we go straight from the knighting ceremony to the confrontation with Zod. In the anime, Griffith has his men attack an enemy supply base by focusing their efforts on the front of the base. After laying out the plans, Corcus makes a remark that Guts will get all the credit again, and Casca reminds him that Griffith's orders are absolute. Casca then makes a half-hearted attempt to mend fences with Guts, but he ignores her and walks off. Now, I feel like this interaction with Guts and Casca and the remarks by Corcus are rather interesting because it sort of builds on the idea that not everyone in the Band of the Hawk is happy with Guts' actions. Most are, probably 90-95% of the Hawk is fairly happy with Guts. They're glad to have him on their side. He's such a force, such an asset, and they're just loving it because less and less of them are dying in battle, and all their plans are going off without a hitch. But it is interesting to see this whole dynamic with Casca and Corcus sort of expanded upon, because we have it in the manga, but it's nice to see further details, to see that it really is weighing on their psyches constantly, and it's sort of gnawing at them in sort of insidious ways. Now, Adon happens to be in charge of watching the base, since the Black Ram Cavalry were heavily crippled in the last battle. Now, it's rather interesting because the anime makes it a point to prominently feature Adon in many battles. He more or less serves as the primary antagonist for the first half of the show, whereas in the manga, he sort of feels like an afterthought. In addition, Adon doesn't even show up until chapter 14 in the manga. So Mira really wasn't putting Adon in there to be this primary focus point, to be this perpetual antagonist to the Band of the Hawk. Whereas he gets thrown in a lot earlier in the anime and he shows up time and time again. Now Griffith's men break through the fort gate, and after realizing the gravity of the situation, Adon himself runs away in fear. However, he sets fire to the armory in an attempt to kill Griffith's men in the midst of the invasion. Guts notices the flames and heads towards Griffith to warn him. Casca, angered by the fact that he's breaking rank again, excoriates the swordsman, but Guts swings his sword at her and barks at her to go back. Guts then warns Griffith and they make their escape, and upon escaping, the Band of the Hawk acknowledges Guts for his keen awareness. Yet Casca can't help but feel irritated by his disobedience once again. This moment further contextualizes her disdain for Guts and how she's viewed him in the past 3 years. Though she does apologize and acknowledge his efforts in protecting Griffith, it more or less seems forced, much like a child apologizing to their sibling in the presence of their parents. I mean, yeah, they're apologizing, they're saying the words, but at the end of the day, do they really mean it? And that's kind of the same situation with Casca. Is she really apologizing to Guts? Does she mean it? Probably not. Adon then boasts to Bascan that he killed the Band of the Hawk, but the leader of the Purple Rhino Knights sees through his lies. Now Bascan, just like Adon, shows up a great deal earlier in the anime compared to the manga. For example, we don't see him until chapter 22 in the manga, which happens after the battle with Guts and the 100 soldiers. So the anime makes it a point to provide more details about the Tudor army, so as to build them up as one of the main threats in the series, which they are in the anime. Whereas in the manga, they were a major threat, but it always kind of felt like they were this pseudo-threat in a way. Like, it always felt like there was a bigger presence waiting for Guts in the future. Whereas in the anime, it sort of tricks you a little bit. It sort of makes the Tudor army the big bad antagonist, and then when things kind of take a turn for the worse, you're kind of left to guess, like, what the hell just happened? Where did all these real threats go? And why are all these mythological creatures coming into the fold? I mean, we sort of already know that from the first episode with the Snake Baron, but I feel like you kind of get stuck in this malaise where it's like, things just seem normal for the rest of the series, and then you're left to wonder, like, did that first episode really happen? What's going on here? And you sort of forget about it a little bit, so I think it comes as more of a shock in the end, and I absolutely love that about the anime, actually. I feel like it gives you a new perspective on it. Now, of course, whenever the staff implements anime original content, the question then becomes, why couldn't they have adapted more from the source material instead? Like I stated in the first episode, the idea was to bring things down to earth, tell a realish story about medieval Europe, and keep things focused on character interactions and growth. And honestly, it worked beautifully. For my personal preference, whenever a manga gets adapted to anime format, it's best to view it as a separate entity. The director is adapting their own unique vision onto the screen, and it's a good thing when they interject their own ideas to give the work its own unique character. I know we would all love to see Berserk verbatim in anime format, but isn't that what the manga's for? I mean, we already have that. I can read the manga anytime I want. I already have Mira's vision. I want to see someone else's vision of Berserk. I want to see some twists and turns. I want to see different perspectives. I want to see anime original content. As an aside, I know a lot of people have been talking about the idea of Mira's assistants continuing the Berserk tale in manga format. And I mostly cringe at this idea because I view the manga as Mira's work. That's his vision, his artwork, and his ideas. But if, hypothetically speaking, an anime studio adapted the Fantasia arc and offered an original ending to tie up all the loose ends, I'd actually be completely fine with that, since it's a separate piece of fiction at that point. So if it was a movie or an anime series of Mira's work and it completed the tale, I'm fine, because that's really not Mira's work at that point. It's drawing upon his ideas, but it's a new director, new staff, everything is different. They're taking the skeletal framework and they're making it their own. Whereas the manga, that is Mira's. Like, I don't want anyone else to put their fingerprints on it. So I'm sure some of you will disagree, some of you will probably agree, but yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I've sidetracked long enough. Now, not only does Baskan show up earlier than expected, so does Genin, who didn't show up until chapter 17 in the manga, and he really actually didn't show up because this was a flashback of when Casca was recounting Griffith's encounters with him years ago. Now, afterwards, the King of Midland announces that Griffith will head up the next castle siege, and we have our first sighting of Julius, who expresses visible disdain for Griffith, which Foss picks up on right away. Now, in the manga, Julius doesn't appear until chapter 7, which happens after the castle siege and the confrontation with Zod. And it's kind of interesting because now we know how Foss got the idea of manipulating Julius. Whereas in the manga, it just kind of caught you off guard. You didn't really know who this Foss character was. So I love that it's tying up all the loose ends and sort of providing a bridge to certain events while providing original content. So episode 5 was absolutely fantastic, guys. I love all the original content about it. And like I said, it's its own separate entity. You got Berserk with Kentaro Miura, the manga. You got the 1997 version, which is absolutely epic, 10 out of 10. You got the movies, which do an okay-ish job. The animation in that first and second movie weren't the greatest, but still very good in their own respect. And then you got 2016 and 2017 Berserk, which, you know, I know how we all feel about that one. But yeah, I would actually be fine, guys, if they made an anime adaptation of Berserk, the Fantasia arc, and they decide to kind of go in their own direction and sort of make some educated guesses as to where Miura was going with the series. But let me know what you guys think of that idea. Let me know what you think of episode 5, and I'll see you guys next time with episode 6.